Welcome back, guys, to another video. This video is going to be a lot shorter than last week's video. Today, I'm going to be going over photography stuff. One of my favorite YouTubers, his name is Teo Crawford. He kind of does this style of video where he takes a GoPro out, records himself taking pictures, and he kind of just goes over the pictures that he took and kind of goes over what he liked and what he didn't like about them. And so I'm going to go over some pictures that I took from last year and maybe even just a couple from the year before as well. But yeah, like I'll kind of give you guys some insight into, how I set some of these pictures up, maybe what I'm looking for when I'm, going through and editing these pictures. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy this video and let's get into it. So the very first picture that I want to look at is this picture of a bridge in San Francisco. I'd mentioned it in my last video, but during my travels in San Francisco, I did a lot more kind of video stuff and a bit more photography. So we're going to be going over some of the pictures from that I took in San Francisco, and this is one of them. I wanted to start off with this one just because I think it's, not as interesting of a photo. But also, I think that I can start off with this picture and explain what my thought process is. So, I would say that the composition of this photo is just not that great. The lens that I was using is a 28 to 70 millimeter. And for this kind of picture, it definitely would have been better to use something that was maybe like 200 millimeters, something like that. But I guess the idea that I had set up or that I was kind of going for is that this kind of tree in the foreground would be a kind of prominent element, but I think in this picture is maybe taking up too much of the foreground. But I was hoping to split into thirds, maybe like a third is the foreground with the tree. The middle part would be kind of like a focus on the bridge and just kind of like the elements that are kind of the main focus in the picture. And then the top would just be like these clouds. But I think what it comes off as is it just kind of looks poorly composed. And yeah, I think the more I look at it, the less I like it. And my edits for it were really just like color related things. And I think that it's still probably far too overexposed. And I think because I didn't like the composition of this photo very much, I kind of decided that maybe wasn't worth kind of working on too much. But in this kind of top third, it's definitely overexposed. I would probably bring down the overall exposure down a bit. I do like the colors, I think, but once again, I think because I'm shooting on a 70 millimeters, and I will say my camera is not a full frame sensor. It's a crop sensor, so it's not a true 70 millimeter. I believe if I push it to 70 millimeters, it's actually more accurately something like a 105 millimeters. So I think 200 would have looked better, and it would have pushed the image closer into like some more interesting elements. I've been saying this past year, but I love taking pictures in Taiwan, just because everything is so dense and there's just so much kind of stuff to take pictures of, and all the different buildings and all the different things that are there, it helps to give depth and kind of just like layers to your pictures. Whereas this picture, I think it kind of fails at that because it really just is the trees and the sky, and it's like the intention was for the focus to be the bridge, but I don't think that it's highlighted enough in this picture, and also the focusing is kind of poor. But yeah, I mean, I think overall, like, at least I can see the vision that I was going for, but unfortunately, it's not my favorite photo. So the next picture I want to talk about is one that I do like. While I was in San Francisco this time around, I got a chance to, take a look at Alcatraz, and I mean, it's just a picture of Alcatraz. I think it's a simple picture, but I think that like it's it's very obvious what the main focus of this picture is. It's clear what the intent of this picture is. And I think that is one of the more important things. Um, I I do think the picture is a little basic, but I think in comparison to the last picture, that kind of division of like the foreground and what the main focus of the picture is and the sky element, it's a lot better distributed in this picture. I think in the last one, that foreground element was just far too large and it was just too in focus as well. And I think this picture does a better job. I think the color that I went for in this picture is kind of like similar to what I went for in that previous picture. And I could still say that like this picture is maybe a little overexposed. But in the original, it is definitely overexposed, and it's very blue in this original. And so I kind of wanted to give it a bit more of a stylistic approach, as at least with the color of it. And so I went with this kind of more green kind of tint. But if we bring the exposure down just a little bit, um, I think it'll ground the foreground element a bit, and it'll give it less detail. And in doing so, it'll push the focus of the picture more towards the center where I'm intending it for it to be. Um, but I would say there's not too much to talk about. I think the composition's good. I think the colors I think are good. But that's kind of like really subjective. And yeah, I think it's not a bad picture. I'm pretty happy with this one. Moving on to the next picture, and I would say this picture is probably my favorite from last year. I think that so for a little bit more context, I am very much so like a portrait photographer. I love taking pictures of people. Like having something to interact with, I think is a lot more interesting. And I only have two lenses right now, and so like landscape photography is not something that I'm like super into. But this picture, I think the composition is amazing. Um, Not to toot my horn, but if we take a look at the original, I think the colors and the composition here is already great. As you can tell, like there's really not that much that I actually changed with the edit. In the original, um, or in this picture in general, I just think that the framing of, the trees and like the foreground stuff and the way it really kind of like centers the main kind of point of this image, which is just this apartment kind of complex or this house, whatever it is. Um, and I don't know. I just think that there's a lot of texture. There's the lighting and the contrast is really great. And then in the edit, I think the color and I believe it was the detailing, or was it the detail? No, it was. I put the clarity really low for this picture, and I think it gives it this kind of like older look. I think it makes it look even more vintage. And I think because the style that I'm going for is a more vintage look, it really suits what this image ended up being like. And I really kind of turned the yellows and the oranges up, just to give it even more of that kind of summer vibe, especially with like this palm tree. I just think like this picture, for so many reasons, is just it's like a really great photo. And like while I didn't take that many pictures last year, I think that without a doubt this is my favorite picture. I also think that like the circumstances surrounding the picture were also just kind of basically my mom and I, we had visited Coit Tower, which is really just like this. It's just a tower. It's there's not really much to say about it. I thought visiting it gave a good view of like the city and everything, and that was cool. But this picture specifically, as we were leaving, there's like a staircase that leads down to, like where these buildings are. And just through the tree line, I saw this building and I was like, I think that, this is kind of my favorite thing to do is like taking pictures of thing and playing with focus and playing with like foreground elements and like what I actually want in focus. And as I mentioned previously, with the picture of Alcatraz and kind of lowering the exposure even further to take detail out of the foreground elements in that picture. I think I'm doing a very similar thing here, but I would argue that there's even more layers in this picture, because there's the base foreground, which is almost completely pitch black. There's the trees that are in front of this building, which you can still see the green and like the tint that is on them, and then there's the building itself. But then I don't know, like once again, with the whole thing of taking pictures of buildings in highly densely kind of areas, you can kind of see layers, and there's like a lot more texture. There's a lot more interesting things about this picture. And for all those reasons, this is my favorite picture from last year. I specifically didn't put this picture in my last video because I didn't want to spoil it ahead of anything. But yeah, I'm very proud of this one. And, just me finding it, I felt like it was just a really good find in my opinion. But while we're on the topic of kind of these landscape pictures, let's turn to this electric tower. I think conceptually it is pretty much the exact same as the Alcatraz picture of the bridge in the first photo. As you see, I have the foreground element, and then I have the tower itself, and then the sky. This picture was very much so a test, because I was testing user presets, and I took this picture around the same time that the Kodak Portra 400 simulation, or like the preset on Lightroom, was kind of getting popular. People were sharing it all over TikTok, and people were like, DM me and I'll send you this stuff. And I got it, and I ended up just copying it into mine and then making some minor tweaks after that. But I think it looks pretty good. I think that there's a lot of texture in it because of the grain that was added in post. I think that the colors are really nice. I think that with kind of landscape photos, something that I personally struggle with is that I think that like with people, there's a moment to specifically capture, and with kind of buildings and stuff like that, or with like landscape photos, what I'm looking for is like, is this an interesting thing to start with? And the other thing is like texturally, is this like, how does this look? And I think doing this kind of like simulating this film in this picture kind of helps it a lot to give it a bit more texture, because I think just on its own, it's probably not a very good picture, or it's probably not as interesting of a picture. And if I go back to the original, I think the color here is actually quite nice. I really like the orange on this picture, but it's definitely kind of like, it's pretty flat. And one of the aspects of this picture that I was realizing when I pulled it back up was that like as far as the f-stop, it's not giving us a lot of variance as far as what's in focus and what's out of focus. The trees in the light in the power, in the electric tower, feel pretty similar in focus, and because of that, it feels kind of flat in my opinion. And I once again, as I said, I like kind of playing around with focus and seeing how that affects pictures and whatnot. And I think in the original, I think it was the color of it and just kind of this solitude of this kind of figure kind of in the distance that was so appealing about it. But playing around with it, I really do kind of like seeing how to experiment with these kind of pictures by adding texture and changing the colors a bit more. But honestly, I could bounce back and forth between these photos, and I could still say I like both of them. And so yeah, I think that's not a bad photo at all. So for the last photo that I kind of want to talk about in this specific video, and mind you, I want to do these kinds of videos in the future, more and more. I'm thinking about like 5 photos per video. I don't know how long these videos are going to be intended to be, but I don't really know how much I can talk about when I'm doing these. And because of that, I want to start making videos where I take you guys out on these photo shoots with me, just like Theo Crawford does. And I think that'll give me a even better kind of opportunity to kind of show you guys how I am when I'm actually taking pictures. And that way I can take pictures that are closer to the date of filming, and then I can give you guys an even more detailed explanation of what my thought process was going into this. But let's talk about this photo. So this picture is really interesting to me. So this is a picture of the apartment buildings that are right across from the apartments from where I live in Taiwan. I think this picture looks really kind of weird, honestly. I think that the lighting looks really intense, and there's something about this picture that just looks like it's a 3D model. So when I took the picture, the intention was, I think that all the lines and the shape language of it, and there is color variance. There's the oranges and the greens, and the blues from the window in this specific picture. I think that like all those things were like, maybe this is something worth taking a picture of. And then when I took it and put it in post, put it in Lightroom, this picture just looks so not real to me. And I found that really cool. And I tried playing it with it a lot. Like I played with this picture a lot, and I could not get it to a place where I was like, oh, this is really good, or this is a lot more interesting than what it already was. And if we take a look at the original, it's really overexposed, right? And this is one of those things where it's like, maybe it would have been an issue, but once I kind of took that in the post and just brought the exposure down a little bit, I believe that's pretty much all I did. So I just brought the highlights down, the exposures down just a little bit, and I have the shadows and everything up. And so the contrast, while I didn't adjust the contrast significantly itself, by editing everything else, the contrast was definitely influenced. And I just think that I think it looks really cool in this picture, honestly. And I still think that it looks kind of like just like a 3D model. It just doesn't look real to me. And I've used it as the background banner on my website. And I mean, I think from a textural standpoint, I'm not getting as much as I maybe initially was thinking of, but I do think the shape language and the colors of it are pretty cool. But I think from a textural standpoint, it's like, when I'm taking pictures of something like this, I think if I wanted to get more texture out of it, I would have needed to stand farther away and take a picture of it from then. That way, like, it would have actually looked like a texture rather than like all these kind of solid lines. But if we kind of look at the original photo, there are some details that I actually do end up masking out. There's a little branch at the bottom right of the screen. In the middle of the screen here, there's this little thing. I can't tell exactly what it is that I'm looking at, but I do kind of mask it out just to give it kind of this even more clean look. And I think that makes it even kind of more, I don't know if the word is ethereal, but it looks even more abstract because of that. But if I zoom the picture out anymore, I definitely would have shown more of the surrounding area, and I don't think that was the intention. I think that like this picture, it doesn't need texture. I think that like for me, I'm not feeling any sense of like, if art is supposed to make you feel something, this makes me feel curious, and this makes me kind of question what I'm looking at, and it makes me think about things in a way. And I don't know how these pictures make you guys feel, but once again, please tell me what you guys think about it. Tell me what your favorite picture in this video was. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this video. Once again, tell me if you guys like this kind of format. I'll definitely kind of be improving on it. I kind of filmed this very last minute, or not like last minute, but I knew that I needed something for the week to edit and so that I could put out on Friday. But yeah, I think that that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys for coming back and watching this video with me. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will be back next week with something else. But yeah, in the meantime, I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.